Welcome to another episode of the Mindset Athlete Podcast with me, James Roberts, transformational coach, two-time Paralympian, and TEDx speaker. I have another awesome episode for you today, so let's get straight into it. And on today's show, I've got John Stanbridge. John is a GB development bobsleigh pilot, an all-round athlete and able to adapt to most sports quickly. He played rugby and football at youth level, has had a 13-year career as an aircraft avionics technician, serving on rotary and fixed wing aircraft around the world. He's had 3 tours of Afghanistan in support of the Chinook fleet operations and was introduced to bobsleigh through the military in 2013. He competed at inter-service level for the past 4 years, was loaned out to the New Zealand bobsleigh team as a brakeman in the 2019-2020 season, and debuted as a pilot for GB in the 2020-21 season. He's looking to establish himself as one of the upcoming GB development pilots and work towards the 2026 Olympic Games. So welcome onto the show, John.
Cheers. Thank you, James. It's great to be here. You've got some pedigree, so it's good to get my message out there and appear on such a great show. So.
Wow. Well, as I said to you before we started recording, I said I was going to make a mistake and I didn't. So obviously it's there's I'll be honest with people, because I was going to edit the where I did do a few mistakes, but that obviously is part and parcel of podcasts. And I think it very exemplifies what sport is. We refine, we tweak, and ultimately improve. I would like to say in the past I would use the word fix. To be able to ultimately have a better performance. So that being said, then, John, with you being an all-round sportsman and doing football and rugby at a younger age, were there any other sports on the periphery as well?
Not. I did a little bit of track. Your club sort of school level, attending the sports days, that sort of thing. And I'd usually be one of the quicker guys out of the group. When I was younger, I was only I was probably a lot smaller than I am now. I probably didn't have a growth spurt until I was about 16, 17. So I was somewhere around the 5 foot area for quite some time. So sport was a big thing for me to be involved with when I was younger. It was an outreach, but definitely getting out there and enjoying life. When you're young, playing football, your tea breaks and stuff like that at school. I'll be out kicking the football around, playing with my mates, trying to push the bigger guys out of the way. And I think that's sort of the mentality, trying to do the best I can with what you've got, So.
You were talking about being the smaller person. Tell people in terms, because I had a conversation with you a couple of weeks ago before we come on to record today. Talk about the massive weight gain you've had to implement to be successful in bobsleigh, because I think people will be aghast by the figures that you're talking about.
So bobsleigh itself is based on having power. Weight plays a big factor. When you've got a sled that weighs 390 kilos and the minimum sled weight is 170, you need 2 big burly guys, roughly 110. So when I first got introduced and the tryouts, which came through the RAF and the military level, I first went down at 70 kilos, 72 kilos at first. And it took me probably a good 6-7 years to build that up to the 80, 84, 85 mark. And over the last 3-4 years, it's really took on to, I'm now up to 95, 97 on a good and bad day. So with that power, the weight has come power, training, discipline, all those sort of things you're looking to improve to be that sport, powerful, speed-based athlete. So,
do you think you would have been just as successful in rugby if you'd have put on that box? Because obviously that's pretty much a winger nowadays.
Yeah. The weight size is a big thing. Yeah, definitely. I think it's just certain sports and military took me away from sporting, and the career that I've gained from that is different, and it's also given certain opportunities. But I think you need that weight and power to be dominant in a sport. When I did play football and rugby, I was maybe a bit of a whippet, but I'd still put in those big tackles sometimes and challenge those guys to try and make my mark, because people didn't suspect it at times. You've got that little advantage sometimes, but with the weight you can always push through. So.
And obviously, I mentioned earlier on an episode that you were obviously attached to a Chinook regiment, and people that are obviously not knowledgeable of helicopters and within American aircraft to start off with. Is that kind of balance between the service personnel quite normal now, more so nowadays, than in terms of having RAF look after what is army equipment?
Well, the Chinook is actually an RAF asset, so
okay.
It's controlled by the RAF. The army, you find a sort of a perception that the army, anytime you see a helicopter or something like that, anything green, it's owned by the army and that sort of control. But it's actually an RAF helicopter that's managed and engineered by us as avionics technicians and aircraft maintenance. So, there is a balance where we do work closely with other services, the Army and Navy, to keep that UK force going. So.
I learned something different. I learned something new there, so I appreciate that, John.
No, that's all
To
right.
update my my but I guess it's. Do you think it's because of the historical bias of it coming out of the army in the first place, and that shows my history? Maybe a little bit of history buff there, a little bit.
Yeah, potentially. You always, yeah. But for me, like whenever I've been out on, say, around civilians and in the public eye and stuff like that, you'll see any other service. If you're not army, you'll get referred to as army. It's a general. Oh, they brought the army out. Like with the COVID situation at the moment, we had people working around in areas providing COVID tests and that sort of stuff.
Do you think, John, and because and a lot of people won't know this about my family upbringing, because my mother was a native civilian and my father was in the military himself. Do you think that misconception with COVID testing comes about with them being in the camos of it being predominantly green, so they make that assumption?
Yeah, that's true. We all wear that uniform. So I've got a blue uniform that I work day to day. I have a green uniform that I work when we're doing exercises and deployments, and I actually spend most of my time in overalls. So I'll travel to work and then get changed into overalls. I'll be fixing the planes and stuff, and then the perception that army is probably to do with the uniform.
Do you think a little bit? And this will show our age a little bit, G.I. Joe. Do you think the RF needs to maybe be in some blue camouflage? I know it won't work. I know it won't, in certain circumstances, it wouldn't work.
No, the whole premise. Like the American Air Force then, so it's probably best to avoid that.
Well, for me, it's not so bad, because we were having that conversation a few weeks ago. My grandfather's RAF and my father is US Air Force. So what I did with my don't bark. I got to edit it out. But what I did is obviously make a logo out of making homage to both, well, my father and obviously on my mother's side, my grandfather, and I'm kind of have a nod to, well, it is both of them are red, white, and blue. So that'd be an interesting. I thought it would never. No barking. No. There you go. Gonna stop now. But obviously, where am I going to go with that conversation? That's one of those.
So our logo that I've made as a homage to all three services. So within the bottom right corner, you've got an infantry soldier, an aircraft, and a Navy ship. Because what I was trying to achieve is put a military team together and build on the resources that we've got to show what we can showcase in the sport and how important we are to progress. with the history that's been with military athletes reaching the Olympic Games, such as Sean Olsen in Nagano, bronze medalist. You've had John Jackson at Sochi 2012, four-man bronze medalist, and Stu Benson was an RAF engineer doing the same job that I do, and a Scottish track and field, and he also got the bronze at Sochi. So we've got long-standing ties with Lamin Doon, who's one of the well-established 2 and 4-man GB senior squad, who's going for his 3rd Olympics now. So it shows that we've got athletes coming through, and the importance of the military within GB bobsleigh as a sport, and all other sports. We're almost like the pathway to a degree without that funding. So.
And what is 2026? I know we're 5 years off it, but what? Because as me coming from a summer discipline, obviously it kind of gets overshadowed, doesn't it?
Yeah,
a little bit. The winter guys kind of forgotten
Milan
about.
Cortina, it should be for 2026. So that'll be over in Italy. Cortina's, the track has been disused for a little while now, so it looks like they're going to restore that and get that back up to scratch. I think it's held the games previously or at some point. So yeah, we were aiming to try and work towards 2022 in Beijing. Looking at the timeline and our experience, we were ambitious, but we're on the right path to heading towards that extra time to establish yourself and really get those results that you need.
So the winter games haven't been pushed back then, like the summer games then?
Not at the moment. I don't know. There is issues out there at the moment where if they push anything back, it's going to cause problems with, it's costing money at the moment for Tokyo Games to a substantial amount, like a couple $100 billion or something. I saw quite a large. So we have to wait and see what happens. A pushback for me could give us an opportunity, but we'll take what we adjust, we adapt, and overcome what comes at us. So.
Well, I think that's why athletes themselves are in a very good position when it comes to that, from logistical mindset or just the adaptability to being like flexible. It's like, well, okay, I've had a little bit of a hiccup or it's not worked out my way. Okay, I'm not going to play the victim. I'm just going to adjust and fine tune for it, obviously, so it works out. So pretty much my life's like that. It's like people are like gobsmacked. It's like, James, you've had so much upheaval, and obviously I'll use the words that people will say as adversity. For some of it's not. It's like it's I've never even thought twice. It's like, well, it was a problem at the time, and that was it. Let's find the solution. And I think that probably stems from my upbringing and I was trying to think of what actually self-discipline looks like to me, because I gave people like examples of it. What it looks like on paper. It's like, well, for me and for you and pretty much every athlete that I had the opportunity to interview for the show, self-discipline is pretty much, from a marketing perspective, is the word eludes me now. When you create less demand, I can't think what it's called.
Not sure.
I'll go with that. People know what I'm talking about. But obviously, if there's only one item for you and I to purchase, one of us is going to miss out. And I think sport does that amazingly, because no athlete would look at that as, well, pretty much day in, day out, they create that environment of, if you don't perform, there's no guarantee you'll be here tomorrow.
Sport is very much so based on those results, and the only thing that will tell is results. You can always facts and figures are the best way to determine statistically what they say is who's the better athlete, because it's one on track, it's one on the ice, it's one on the scoreboard. If you can't perform on that day, or you're only as good as your last result. So
well, obviously it goes a bit deeper than that, but we won't.
Yeah.
You and I won't go into that. But people that are athletes and know that is like to be like series of, if they can't differentiate between two athletes, they'll go to the next tier and so on, and to find that whatever marginal gain that whoever has the ascendancy over the other person, that's why they're going to win out. Obviously life doesn't work like that, but no. I think, and I'm going to go out on a limb here, I think sometimes the civilian world needs to, I'll use it loosely like that because I think it works well with what we're talking about. I think it needs to do that because this sense of entitlement, it doesn't serve anybody, because if you just, whoever moans the loudest wins, what does that kind of prove? It's like, well, if I'm louder than you, I'm going to win.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean your point is not valid, but so I don't go off on too much of a ranty tangent. I think it's something that they need to learn, and it's obviously deep rooted, respect, discipline, pretty much. What is the RAF motto?
It's per arda ad astra, and you've got one that was recruiting when I went through all those 12, 13 years ago, was rise above the rest. So it's all about inspiring to become better. Which I think
is that a little bit of I won't make you say it, but a little bit of political thing of saying we're better than the other services.
No, each service does their own job, and it's got their own advantage. So we're main job is to support air power, which is supplying aircraft for those pilots to.
Well, I think the military as a whole, John, I think they do a great job in terms of marketing because they've all adapted to social media. I think the army is probably the best, as they've really knocked it as well. You could go out on the lash until they just drink more, which obviously every service personnel probably does it. But in terms of, you're going to get trolling on social media. But if you come into the military, we're going to support you. Obviously, before that, on any service member, you've got to get through basic training. So they're going to break you down, build you back up to everybody thinks the same way. Obviously, you said the RF wants you to think a little bit more.
Yeah, so we all do our basic training. It's not to the same level as, say, the Marine Commandos or the parachute regiment or something like that. We do a 9-10 week basic course that gives you information about airspace and all that sort of core values that we work on. Respect, integrity, service before self, and excellence. That's their sort of discipline sort of guidelines, and what we try to adhere to, like in your everyday, like sort of life to work towards. You do like a green phrase where you spend a few days out in the field, live firing, and so we're still rifle trained, still get our hands a little dirty, and then you've got a drill phase towards the end where you have a really nice time where family come down, get to watch you pass out, which is inspiring and a really strong moment for myself, because it was the first time I ever saw like my dad sort of cry at 46 years old he was. So really, really strong moment. You build through that, and it's definitely worth the opportunity.
Well, I think it's, and I said it to you when we were talking last. I think people need to take things into some sort of the equation when they think about what they're going to do after school. I'm not saying go into the military.
No,
that would be very manipulative to me to say something like that and go. But in terms of if your options are limited, I think from an educational standpoint, what it gives back to you is obviously it's another card for you to play in life as well. Why not utilize? The Americans definitely do it. If they can get a degree while they're serving, they'll do it. I think pretty much I'm gonna say I'm gonna go out on a limb here, like 50% of the kids I went to school with are acting service members, but that is an environment that they've always known. For them, it's like, well, I wouldn't think of doing anything else because they're either the mother or the father or the grandparent, or just the like long lines of things, like everything with when. I think when you've got that synergy where it's coming down through the generations, you think, well, I can't do anything else. For me, obviously, I had no other choice because of the disability, and I thought it's probably only natural that I obviously got into elite sport, and it's my way to keep that legacy going of family being in well, for king or queen, and ultimately I have a choice a little bit more when it comes to sport. But obviously this episode is not about me, it's about you. How was it to, and I'll use an American term now, be farmed out to another national team?
So for me, I saw it as an opportunity to gain that experience. You've always got to look at things as a positive and make the most of what's available to you. So I was offered it through one of John Baines, who was a GB Olympian at Sochi, RF communication specialist, and he got approached by the New Zealand guy. I was one of the top ranking brakemen in the Air Force level, so that's pretty much what you consider as national. So then we spoke about it. He gave me the opportunity, and I helped support the team in North America to compete and over in Europe. We got an 8th overall, I think, in North America. So I was a brakeman with pilot Andy Williams. His experience with the sport itself, engineering-wise, and the sled, I did a lot to help him with that. So he gained that experience. It was definitely getting to know people on the circuit and figure out what everything's about is definitely an advantage when you're stepping into a sport at that level.
Was it not weird, obviously, representing a different national team, because it's pretty much commonplace in rugby, the residency rule, and they obviously rock up for the different nationality.
It was a little different, but with the way how bobsleigh works and the community is so small and not always having the athletes available for all the interest or support from the governing body, we saw it where Joel Fearon actually went over to the Swiss and stood for them for a season. And you see it occasionally between the German, Austrian, the European teams when they switch over, they live close or nearby. They're not quite making that cut yet. I did take the opportunity. I was offered the same similar role to start my pilot debut for GB earlier, but I'd already set up a commitment to New Zealand. So for me, my word is a lot. I wouldn't turn back on something. You've got to respect what you've chosen, and I'm proud that I did do it and gave the opportunity for New Zealand now to grow in the future, hopefully. So
I think that value that you've got, John, is I think it's very much built into the core of every military service, and I think it's a dying art in civilian life, because what you said there. I pretty much live and breathe it. If I've said something, I'm going to honor it, and I don't need to write it in stone. And I think obviously of the generations of past, I think some people, I'm not going to generalize and say everybody, but a small proportion of the population has obviously forgotten about that, because I'm only going back 2 generations, and that's normal. Of whatever you say is, you don't need to spit in your hand and shake on it. It's, I'm going to honor what I say, and I'm going to follow through for it. But I think what you say there is to be exemplar, because pretty much you stuck by your word, you followed through, and obviously when you found time to step aside for the betterment of their national program, you did so. You obviously said to me that it didn't have to be the case, but you felt it right to not be in front of somebody based on just wearing a t-shirt for the sake of it, or being parachuted in just for a performance base. You didn't want to be one of those individuals that's just going there for the tracksuit.
No. For me, I want to compete and I want to do well. I know I'll feel a lot better, which I have done this season, competing for Great Britain and proving myself among some of the best in the world, by competing internationally in the European Cup, and the development guys as well. We're looking to push up and work towards those senior spots in the future. I can't do that for New Zealand, and the overall goal for any athlete is for me personally is to make it to the games. But I want to get to that point and compete. The window between now and over in Milan and Cortina 2026 is an achievable timescale to make a real decent mark and get us up to that standard.
So if we move obviously to this season, how challenging has it been?
To start as a debut season, put a team together, manage, raise funding, sponsorship, all during a global pandemic. It has been a bit of a, I wouldn't say a nightmare, but it has challenged me immensely. If it wasn't for maybe the experience that I've had as a JNCO or a corporal in the military, I don't think I'll be able to cope. Well, not cope, but I was better prepared than some other people may have been. So it was really difficult. We had to find sponsorship with the national governing body not being funded at the moment after results based from the last Olympics in Pyeongchang. We were almost worked alone to try and find that money. We were looking for £15,000 in sponsorship, and we managed to raise £9,000. Any shortfall was covered by us as individuals, so we had to self contribute to our accommodation, to our food, and a little bit for myself. I actually had to find a way to purchase a van to get us out on season. We covered well over 8,500 miles, I think.
Wow.
Over a 10-week period. So we ended up doing 5 training weeks and 4 race weeks out of the 5 we originally wanted. And it was really tough. It was absolutely new challenge to me. Approaching businesses, getting into sponsorship is a task in itself. And I've learned immensely how to approach people better. Communication and deal with people is probably the hardest thing. It's when you're in a team environment, you can't always keep everyone happy because you've got to look at the bigger picture, which is to try and push that result, that training. And in a sport where you've only got seconds to get better, each run costing 60, 70 euros each, you'll get maybe 15 in a week, 16 in a week. So you need to make those seconds that you do have really count. So
this is the question I thought I'd bring up. But in terms of like the budgeting, in terms of that, like you're talking about 60, 70 euro a run.
Yeah.
Do you think that brings it more to the fore about you need to grasp every millisecond of this because this is costing money at the end of the day?
Yeah, it is important. It's an expensive sport overall. So your typical run down a track is 50 seconds, 50 to 55 seconds, say. And you can only make that mistake. You're going to make mistakes. And yet the best part is the ones that can learn from it and adapt and you can get yourself back on track so it's faster lines. So cost is a big thing. If we didn't have the financial support, it wouldn't be possible. I was fortunate enough to be able to use military equipment like a RF sled that's well over a decade old now but can still hold its own to a point. Without that, I'd be completely disadvantaged. I'd be needing 20-30 grand towards a sled, or 8,000 to 10,000 for a hire for the season. Runners cost between 5 and 15 grand. As an overall travel, everything all adds up. So it is a business. You're almost setting up a business to try push your sport through, so and achieve.
You'd never think looking at it that it's so expensive, but I think it's almost marginalizing itself in a way, and when we talk of equity, inclusion, and diversity, it's one of them sports is massively putting themselves out of the reaches of, say, inner city kids, just by the cost that you're talking about. And I think what you described to me when we were talking the other week of the rotary brake, not rotary brakes, the wipers on the helicopter versus what they are in the real world. Just because it's a military contract, we can put an extra couple of zeros on it. I'm thinking, well, that's barbaric.
Yeah, so you find that with niche sports or something that's there's a reasonable following for bobsleigh, but the amount of technology that goes into it, similar to like UF1, I consider it as the Formula One of ice sports. Really, you're using carbon fiber, latest materials to get this sled as light as possible, most aerodynamic, to give you those extra marginal gains, which are hundredths of a second. And when you've only got 3 or 4 manufacturers in the world, they have an opportunity to maybe monopolize the costing. So,
do you think when it comes to sponsorship, and I might cut this bit out, do you think the companies themselves haven't seen the profitability in the run, as it's still airtime?
That
you're giving them.
Once you get to World Cup level, that's the point where you're over YouTube every single week, every race. You'll be there. You'll have your logo on the side of the sled, your band nearby, and your team kit. So you stand in the winner's box, waiting for the next sled to come down, which makes it exciting. So you're waiting for them to either beat you or go slower. So you got your orders pulled out of the hat. Your first one down, and then it's ranked reverse order. So you'll start 20th, 19th, 18th. So you're always waiting for someone else to beat you. So it's up for them to mess up to a point where you pick up a few spots. That adds the excitement to the team side of it. But there are sponsors in the background, and it's just pushing out the actual size of the sport. It's one of the most watched ones that are on during the Olympics. It's what everyone's trying to look for that crash, I guess, sometimes. But I completely agree. There's more to bobsleigh that sponsorship isn't aware of. Most people speak about Cool Runnings is probably the first in for anything to do with bobsleigh. So we're trying to raise that profile ourselves, like locally. I know the senior teams have had interviews over ITV, BBC, and that sort of stuff to push it to a higher level. So.
Do you think because we've historically, overall, and I'm talking about winter sports as a whole, not been as successful as the summer games, do you think some of that has a sway on some of the bias towards, well, there's no point pumping money into that because it's not going to yield any profitability for us?
I think it's more to do with accessibility. When you're talking track and field, individuals can go to a local track and do those sprints, do those runs. There has been an amazing success with the skeleton program for well over 10, 11 years now, where they've won medals throughout for the last 3 Olympic Games. So there is profitability, there is sponsorship, there is results there. The hardest thing is accessibility, where we have to travel abroad. The tracks are only built artificially, apart from one in Switzerland, Stanbridge, and you find them mostly in Europe, North America, and a few in Asia. We haven't got the climate and the costing to facilitate a full-size track. You find that the locals where they do train, Germany, Königsee area, they'll be on that track from the age of 5 years old. So where we're playing football, sports, that sort of thing, they'll send them to the track to do luge and as kids as part of the school routine. So it all comes down to what the environment you're in as well. So
Do you think we need to shake it up then, sport? Obviously, I'm now retired, so it's a little bit easier for me to kind of make kind of these kind of outlandish comments. But do you think we need to have a shake up of the system to be able to signpost people? So be it, the person is, I'm not going to say mediocre. Say the person isn't doing very well in track and field as a sprinter. Why not try this? And then obviously you've got.
There is talent ID programs that go about, and I know that's where a few of the older guys, not older, more established guys, such as Ben Simons, Ryan Letts, and they came through a talent ID system. So there was a poster up at universities, and I think they're looking to get back into that sort of program that does work to get these athletes competing at community, at country, county level, that still put in, sub 11, 100 meters, 10.5. Greg Cackett's a similar one.
So the untapped talent.
Yes, that sort of thing. And we have got some prestigious athletes coming through at senior level now. We've got Joel Fearing, who's been around since Sochi, well before Sochi, and James Datalulu. Both of them are sub 10, the second and third fastest ever 100-meter sprinter from Great Britain. So there is prestige in the teams, and it does attract those sports slightly further along their careers. But there is opportunities there. It's just getting those right athletes in, and the biggest thing is funding. It's difficult to do without that funding there. So.
Well, obviously, you're not only competing with the financial disadvantage that you talked about, but if somebody's starting at 5 years old and you're starting 8 years ago, massive disadvantage.
Yeah, definitely. And that's one of the biggest things is you're looking at the kids growing up, going through the sport, starting in luge, maybe moving to skeleton, and then they'll get in a sled at 15, 16 years old. They've actually built in a Youth Olympic Games now that happened in 2020 in Louisiana, and has happened for the last couple of rotas, I think. So it is a pathway for sport, starting to bring that youth quality through. But it isn't accessible to the same level as most of the summer events would be. So.
What do you think we need to change as a country then to give a person how am I going to word this? I'll call it an opportunity, because ultimately the Olympics is the Olympics. Once you have that associated to your name, it pretty much opens doors. So what do you think it's going to take for us as an island to get to and I'm going to use social media to a certain extent, to be like Jamaica because of cool running? What do you think is obviously not from a laughing joke perspective, but from a perform? What can we learn from an island that's got the sun, which we don't have?
You're probably looking at Olympic medals. Like, is the only way you can raise that profile. It was unfortunate for the guys from Sochi, John Jackson, Stu Benson, Bruce Tasker, and Joel Fearing, that they didn't receive their medal until I think it was a couple of years ago now, a year and a half, 2 years ago, due to the Russians being banned for doping. So that took away a couple of spots and took away that opportunity of those opportunities for funding or support that do open those doors. So medals is the way forward for any sport to raise that profile. I don't think anyone's ever going to eclipse Cool Runnings or Jamaica for that. I just don't think it's possible, unless you're German and you're Hansi Lochner or Francesco Friedrich, who's been an absolute tyrant for the last, I think, 6 to 8 years, where he's won pretty much nearly every race, World Cup race, every World Championship in both 2 and 4 man. He's been a very dominant force, and I know he's treated like a celebrity within the German sort of area. So
I appreciate you being honest with that, John. How well, it's not, I can't answer that's the question because that's you don't know. What have kind of contingency plan have you put in for the next 5 years? Should I put it as a question instead?
Okay, so for me, it's trying to raise sponsorship. My profile definitely is. The world is such driven by social media now, and having that presence opens those doors to marketing and those opportunities for funding and sponsorship. Work-wise, for me, it's trying to secure elite athlete, which will give me the full-time status, supported by the military to train and focus fully on the sport. So I've got some pathway and some results to get over the next year or so to establish that, and that's my first sort of key goal, as well as this upcoming season we're starting to plan for. So we'd like to eventually step into a 4-man crew. We've only run 2-man at the moment, and that's the natural progression. Become a better pilot, be able to manage better, and really compete. Be able to compete at a World Cup level would be the next step. Get within your push start, bring those down, and you're likely to get better results. And after your World Cup, you're looking at a World Championship, which will run each year. And we need to start competing on those as we progress towards the Olympic year. But being able to even make your games is an achievement in itself. To compete at games is a completely different level. So that's what our overall goal is. And for me, getting the right people around you, working with the right people, be it programming, nutrition. I was just starting to build that sort of facility around me to enable probably the best I could be.
I appreciate sharing some of that insight into that journey, because I know I hate that question, if I was honest. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? So I appreciate I've worded it slightly differently and coined it something else, but that's what it is under the surface. So how competitive is it? Because obviously I had one of your contemporaries in development set up as well. How competitive is it at the development level? Because there's multiple pilots and brakemen.
Yeah, it's very competitive. We're all operating at a similar level with different, around a similar amount of experience, really. Like both me and Adam Baird came through the military side of it, representing the services, whereas Axel, one of the other pilots, came from the GB brakeman. So we raced at World Cup and over the North American European Cup level, and he stepped into the pilot seat a couple of years ago. So we've all got the same opportunity with terms of doing the best we can. It becomes difficult when you're working with different levels of equipment, because equipment plays such a big part in the sport. So it's very competitive.
And well, 3 doesn't go into 1. That's the difference.
No.
Whereas I've been inside that environment. I think social media has obviously helped that, because you can see the behind the scenes, that I'll use the iceberg analogy. What's under the surface is obviously bigger than what's on the top. But obviously, historically, most people have only seen the finished article, so they don't see all the competitive things that have obviously got that person to the start line. So you mentioned Jamaica. They're not probably one of the best sprint nations for no good reason, as it's pretty difficult to get into the national team, period. So, but I think where they are probably head and shoulders above the rest is that opportunity that you talked about. They're like the Germans. Pretty much competing in front of big crowds as teenagers. So Bolt probably he loved that spectacle because it's, well, I'm going to be the showman, and I'm going to put other people out of their comfort zone because I'm going to play up to the hype and have a joke about it. And obviously, you probably could say people that didn't make their Olympic team probably would be good enough to make some of the other national teams. And there's probably no debate for that. But in terms of the point I'm trying to make is, obviously, I think in Britain we do things slightly, I'm going to say differently. I'm not going to say it's not bad. It's not a bad differently, but I think our approach is maybe outdated a little bit. The slip of a lip, and we'll kind of get on with it, and we'll be humble about what we've accomplished. I think it doesn't work, especially not in this day and age of being front and center in the spotlight of social media. Whereas I think, the likes of the Americans, obviously Bolt's a phenom himself, but the showman people that are quite external in their character, obviously they love the media spotlight. Whereas I think for the majority of Brits, we play down our accomplishments. Do you think that's fair? And then when we try and come into the spotlight, we feel awkward.
Yeah. There's a degree where you've got that, try and not be, you're respectful, but you're doing a job, aren't you? So for me personally, working in the military, it's always been, I'm doing a job, I've got a task to do, I'll get this done. I take that same approach with what I'm trying to do as an athlete. It's good to get recognition when you can for the efforts that you have done. But we do probably shy away from it more than others, as you spoke about other nations and stuff. I completely agree with that. Yeah.
So what do you think needs? Obviously, the current crop of kid people have a problem with that because obviously they grew up. Kids grew up with Facebook, Instagram, things like that. They're well on course to capitalize on that. Obviously, there's problems with that as well that can be distorted. But if we just focus on the positive of social media, we've obviously had to learn some of these nuances and things like that, because I laugh and joke about MySpace, but if I was probably ask somebody that's in maybe 20 years younger, they probably say, what's that? And, yeah, things like that. I've not heard that one in a long time. But obviously these social medias before their time weren't manipulative enough in terms of they didn't grab your attention for long periods of time. Like obviously, the aforementioned, but it's the same company now. But in terms of gripping people to stay on a platform for minutes, hours at a time, we've obviously got to be able to showcase that. So probably why I think bobsleigh is as popular as it is, like you said, people are waiting for that crash. So they're waiting for that little highlight reel as what I can play. Oh, have you seen this over and over again? Obviously, the likelihood of that happening is, I would say, small. You probably say bigger than I think.
Yeah, bigger than you think. So you're working in such fine movements when you're steering a sled. So you're traveling at 70, 80 miles an hour, and you're trying to move the sled within a millisecond or whatever, hold that steer ever so slightly longer to give you a slightly different line. And if you don't get it right, or you push it too far the other way, there's always a risk of a crash. Every run, there's a chance that you may crash. And it's building that confidence to get yourself out of the hole.
So how do you make that? How do you sell that to make that sexy?
It's the speed is probably the big thing. You're talking the fastest, one of the fastest 4-man sleds to ever go down was at Whistler in Canada by Lamin Dean, GB pilot. I think it was around 162 kilometers an hour. So around, I think it was around that sort of speed. So that aspect of it is outrageous. You're not propelled by anything but human power and gravity. The other side of it probably is the danger of it. People do crash. People have got ice burns. One of the guys, Nick Gleason, actually had to have a skin graft where he didn't wear a protective vest during sliding, and it was almost like a third degree burn. It cut right through. So the same as like a motorbike, because the amount of speed you're going, that ice turns to heat very quickly, and it can burn right through. It's the speed, the challenge of it. A lot of people don't understand what goes behind the sport itself. There's a lot of prep that goes in for just those 60 seconds, and that's fun. Checking the sled over each day. I'm doing like a maintenance check, like your MOT with your car, pretty much before and after, to make sure everything's safe, because safety is a really big factor. And we're talking preparation for the runners to get yourself faster. You have to polish them down. When you're doing 4-man drills, loading, you want to get that 4-man team as sufficient and efficiently in the sled as possible. So, there's a lot of preparation into getting yourself there actually on the ice before you even start going.
So let me ask you a funny thing then. So you're obviously a pilot. You've seen cool run-ins. You've never been in the bathtub practicing them.
Never been in the bathtub. Maybe as a joke, right? But never properly. You do mind maps and mind runs. We'll do a track walk every day before we slide, and going through that, you have your track notes to look at, and you'll run that through your head. So I'll visualize, which is a key part of being a pilot, is visualizing the track, your steers, how much you want to put in for each corner, where you are, and you only build that up over time. I can relate it to when I first jumped out of a plane doing some parachute training. The first time I jumped out of the plane, I sort of black out a little bit. You're not as aware. And after each jump, each run, you pick up more. Your peripherals open, you see more, things start to slow down, and you can make those adjustments with those steers that you become familiar with. So,
my penultimate question to you before we wrap up the episode is, if you had an opportunity to sit down with any athlete, dead or alive, who would that be and why?
Oh, I'm not prepared for this.
I'm thinking it's an unconventional one then.
Yeah, it is a little bit. Alan Shearer, like, he was one of my favourite sportsmen when I was younger. Like, followed him for his time at Newcastle, and just like the way he dominated the sport as a goal scorer in and around the box using his power, strength, and he wasn't one of the biggest guys around, but it's something that I probably, like, I've always been a fighter to, starting from a small age to challenge those bigger guys to do better and surprise them, a bit of an underdog sort of thing. But yeah, definitely, Alan Shearer is a good one for me.
And my final question too, before we wrap up the episode, then, is if you had to summarize what we've been speaking about into some, I got an outtake. If you had to summarize what we've been speaking about into one sentence for people to take away, what would that be?
It's when you're challenged with problems, with issues, there's always a way to overcome and adapt to what you want to be or to your goal. If you work hard enough over time, it is possible.
So once again, John, thanks again for coming on the Mindset Athlete podcast.
Cheers, thanks, James.
It's my pleasure. Thanks again for tuning in, and I hope you enjoyed this episode and got loads from it. Anything that was included and discussed will be available in the show notes below. And I would love to hear from you. Come and connect and ask your questions. I've been James Roberts from jamesowenroberts.com. Remember this quote by Chris Harth: an athlete is a mindset. It's how you prepare, think, and execute. not by some elite status or physical stature. Anybody can be an athlete.